Hiya Mark, thanks once again for the footage. Nice to see that things are progressing based on the last two sessions that we've done. Doing a really good job of the backswing. Let's just take a look at this from down the line. One of the things we're trying to get was the club rolling behind us less. You can see that, I mean the club still rolls behind you a touch. You can see though that you try to keep the back of the left hand accumulator 3 from loading too much too soon. One of the things I would say there on sort of reviewing it is that there's maybe insufficient wrist cock at that point. The setting of the wrists would slightly offset the loading of the third accumulator. So remember, accumulator 3, back of the left hand, accumulator 3, cocking of the wrists, accumulator 2, cocking and uncocking the wrists, offset one another during the takeaway. So what I'm seeing here is a player who's trying very hard not to load accumulator 3 too much. You can see that's happening. There's definitely not excessive rolling of the club face. Back of the left hand rotating at a nice rate. There's just a lack of wrist cock at that point. What I'm also seeing there are the elbows dividing ever so slightly. So again, some clarity on what you're doing. The foot flare position is much better than it was. The hip location and the location of your centres is much better than it was. Nowhere near as much side bend to the right here as we had in the previous sessions. Much more appropriate. And the hips are also in a much more appropriate position at P1. So like that up to now. So what I'll be looking at from P1 to P2, some winter work for you now through the festive period, is to squeeze the elbows together and get the wrists fully loaded by maybe P2.5 to P3. Again, if we just run that through, elbows don't really stay together for long enough. Slight separation of the elbows. You can see there the left arm just bending a fraction. So feel from P1 to P2, you're really squeezing the elbows together, and just try and work on a little bit more active wrist set so that the wrists are fully loaded by that point, getting the shaft a little bit more vertical. So isolation work, plenty of swings to P2.5, so this sort of area we see here, trying to establish nice wrist set, full wrist cock, and also the elbows squeezed together, and that'll just help prevent that club drifting under the playing line a little bit, as we see there. Having said that, top of the backswing, pretty centered position, slight lack of side bend to the left when you view it here from face on. You can see the head's drifted up and to the right, so that would suggest the left shoulder needs to work down more. Having said that, if you're squeezing the elbows together and setting the wrist more P1 to P2.5, that left shoulder will trace a much better path. That in turn would possibly help the position of the arms, as the left shoulder, or would help the position of the arms, as the left shoulders tilt down more. The butt of the club will tend to lift and get more onto plane at P4. So again, squeezing the elbows together, setting the wrist more actively. If you had a little bit more shoulder pitch at that position now, you would be both more centered and more on plane. From there in the downswing, my key issue is still this loss of height. I'm just going to play you Mike Bennett through, apologies, in the takeaway. You can see here now, wrist setting a little bit more actively than what we see with yourself. Left shoulder working down more and for longer. So squeezing the elbows together, setting the wrists, allowing the left shoulder to travel down into a slightly more on-plane position. We look at Charlie Wee. Elbows squeezed together, wrist setting actively by P3. More centered, more maintenance of his height. Now then, if we look at what happens from the top, we've still got this tendency to flex forward too much with the upper body. Get the hips back into the forward flex, which is good. Get the knee back into its address flex, which is good. but we're starting to flex the upper body excessively, and that in turn is causing us to lose a substantial amount of height from P4 to P6. From there, you've got the devil's own job now of extending enough to prevent the club driving into the ground. So too much forward flexion rather than an appropriate amount. You can see there from P4 to P5, the knee and the hip returning to its address flex. This movement starts the movement of the arms start to lower down, and then the upper body getting back into its address flex, so that the height is maintained throughout the downswing. So remember what we're trying to achieve: a swing around a fixed axis with a constant inclination to the ground. What we've now got is a swing around a fixed axis but without that constant inclination to the ground. That's changing a lot through the time and space of the downswing. Now bear in mind the changes we've said, Mark, here that you need to work on, like I said, during the festive period. P1 to P2.5, squeeze the elbows together, load the wrist more. I'd like to see you do a lot of isolation exercises on that. Not so many full swings, but really get that P2.5, P3 position boxed off. The backswing from then on, the journey to P4 will take care of itself. In regards to the downswing, the thing I see here is the player is lowering, or you are lowering the butt of the club by the flexing forward of the body and the sliding of the hips. So the gap between the right shoulder and the butt of the club isn't really changing from P4 to P5 point, say 5 at that point there. This gap here, the back side of this triangle formed between the arms and the shoulders, is just pretty consistent from P4 to P5.5, and it's being lowered, and the arms are being lowered by the lateral movement and the flexing forward of the upper body. What we see with Charlie Wee is, yes, there's a lateral movement, yes, there's a movement or flexing forward of the upper body, but the butt of the club, so the back side of that triangle, is expanding consistently from P4. So the butt of the club is moving away from the right shoulder, which is releasing the left arm, accumulator 4, all the way during the downswing. With yourself, we're not really doing a great deal with accumulator 4 until we get to this position in the swing, and then it all starts to fire. You're going to see the right arm straighten very quickly. Elbows still have to divide, otherwise the club will get driven into the floor too much. Good work there at P8, arms much straighter than they were, pushing up off the ground much better than you were as well, extending to the finish. But really we need to work on that move. Too much done with the body, not done enough with the arms. So the back of the triangle is being expanded. Throughout the time and space of the downswing. So the feeling is to get to P4, and as the hips are going forward, the arms need to be coming down at the same rate. So as the hips go forward, the arms come down at the same rate. With yourself, Mark, there's absolutely no chance that the body's not going to flex forward. You've been doing that so much. But you can see there that there's very little movement of the arms from the top. It's the flexing forward of the body. Let's get rid of those plain lines. That brings the arms down. See there at this point, this right arm is still fully loaded. What we're going to see with Mike and Charlie is the arms moving away from the body at the same rate, or moving away from the right shoulder at the same rate that the hips are moving forward. And that, if you've read the book and you've watched the DVDs, that's certainly in there. They talk about the move from P4 to P5 or even P6, where the gap between the butt of the club and the right shoulder is gradually expanding. Whereas with yourself, this gap, again, you can see even at this point, this right arm still fully loaded. Whereas what we're seeing with Mike is a gradual expansion of this right arm as the left arm moves away from the right shoulder. So, a couple of key things to work on there, Mark. First of all, great work. You're doing a good job. It's a better version of the swing that you had. Key isolation from P1 to P2.5. Squeeze the elbows together, fully load the wrists. From P4 to P6, release the arms sooner. So let's feel that the arms are moving away from the right shoulder, the right arm straightening sooner, and the butt of the club is moving away from the right shoulder at a nice steady rate, the same rate that the hips are moving forward. So we'd want to see the back side of this triangle expanding more. That would require less flexing forward of your upper body to lower the club into position and allow you to maintain your inclination to the ground much better throughout the golf swing. Good luck with it. Great to see your progress, as I said. Have a great Christmas and look forward to working with you again in 2013. Well done.